Hello everyone, welcome to the channel of Wall Street Mojo. I welcome all of you to the tutorial of break-even point, and we are going to take over here Netflix break-even and gonna do some analysis on the same. Now as you can see, Netflix hits 100 million subscriber milestone. So in the past 2 decades, Netflix had transform its DVD mail order company to a streaming juggernaut. So US-based entertainment titan Netflix has recently revealed that it has now more than 100 million subscribers, demonstrating just how much the company has grown in the past decade. Much of its growth has come from the international subscriber lured by the popular shows like House of Cards and Stranger Things and Orange and the New Black and so on and so forth. Netflix described as a symbolic milestone of exceeding 100 million members as a good start, and we are looking forward to seeing whether it can continue to expand at the same rate. The company is now valued close enough to 60 billion pounds, making it more profitable than some more traditional media organization, including Rupert Murdoch 21st Century Fox. Break-even point of Netflix recently has crossed 100 million subscribers, with more than half of them coming from outside US. It added 4.693 million US customers and 14.341 million internationally in 2016. Certainly, Netflix is doing great on its subscribers count. However, break-even point is a very important thing to consider if you are just starting out with a venture or calculating no profit or no loss point of a business. In this tutorial, we will look BEP, that is break-even point analysis, in detail, and we also answer the Netflix break-even question in this particular case. So, first, what is break-even point? When a person starts a business, his first question becomes, when will I make the profit from the venture? So if you learn break-even point and how to calculate the units, you would be able to answer your question all by yourself. Suppose you don't own a business, but you do a job. You do have a job. What if you treat your job as a business and ask yourself, when would I be able to recoup all my investments for getting this job and make more than what I've invested? This is a valid question. Break-even analysis will show you how to calculate that point or the juncture since when you would start to make the profit. So now you wonder, how come it would not be possible to get a precise amount of to what the extent timeline when there are so many variables in the market? True, it's not easy as it sounds, but still we can use the break-even point analysis to reduce the complexities and to understand the profit making point of your product or job through the simple methods. Let's have a look at the formula of the break-even point analysis to understand the details of the computation. As you can see in the graph, this is the break-even point, and above that there is a profit. So this is the total revenue line, this is the total cost line, and this is total variable and fixed cost. So break-even is that point where the total cost is equal to the total revenue, as you can see, and below the break-even point there is loss. So this is the amount of sales you need to do anyhow. So in simple terms, the break-even point is a juncture where total cost and the total sales are equal. The point is important for every company to know because from this point the company starts to become profitable. Let's have a look at the formula. We'll go step by step to understand the formula better. If the total cost and total revenue are equal at that point, that means the unit produced would generate zero profit. That means revenue minus total cost is zero. I'll get into the Excel and explain you how the things work. So I mean to say revenue minus the total cost should give us the answer 0 to make it break even. So now let's understand what the total cost is. So the total cost is equal to, I'm writing over here as the variable cost. You will add something over here as you will add fixed cost, and that's it. So that will give you a total cost. So total cost is your variable cost and fixed cost. Let us look at the break-even point, break-even revenue now. Break-even revenue, that is equal to, you will say, the price per unit, into the number, that is into n. So if we put the value of the total cost minus revenue at the first equation, then revenue minus total cost is 0, or price per unit minus n, that is this, minus the variable cost into n plus fixed cost is equal to 0. We can see the following analysis will come into picture. Price per unit into n minus variable cost into n plus fixed cost, or price per unit into n minus variable cost into n minus fixed cost. It's just opening around here and there it's permutation combination, and with that the final comes to n is equal to fixed cost divided by price per unit minus the variable cost. That means the contribution per unit. So your break-even point is that point where your fixed cost has been covered up by the contribution. Okay, so now this formula will give us the units required to produce the break-even quantity where the total revenue and total cost will be equal. Here's something else you need to pay heed, and that is the contribution margin. Very important. The contribution margin per unit is price per unit minus the variable cost per unit, and contribution margin is total revenue minus total cost. So let's make the interpretation of the break-even point. By understanding break-even point, a break-even analysis, you would be able to figure out two things. First, you'll be able to understand how many units you need to produce to break even, so that you would be able to produce more units and generate more revenue to make profits. Second, if you have a goal to achieve the desired profit, you need to do a back calculation, and you would be able to find out how many units you need to produce to achieve that feat. So break-even point is important for any company which is just starting out or which is thinking of investing in its resources into new project. Now let's take some break-even points example. As a break-even point is such an important concept, we'll take a several example to illustrate each part of the analysis, and we will deliberately omit few things to understand BEP analysis much better. Let's get started with the first example. Now the first example, let's take it. Let's say there is company A and there is company B. So the company A and B has some fixed cost which is $30,000 and $50,000. Okay, they have price per unit, I'm just writing price PU, price per unit as 100 and 90. They have variable cost per unit as 40 and 3. So now let's look at the break-even point in terms of units to understand beyond which the company A and B would be able to make profits. Remember the formula. BEP is, I'm writing over here, BEP is equal to fixed cost divided by the price minus the variable cost, which is your contribution margin. So putting this data into the formula, we get something like this. The price per unit is 190. Okay, so I'm just writing over here as answer. The price per unit is 190. The variable cost per unit is 40 and 3. So contribution margin is going to be 100 minus 40, that is 60. Press Ctrl R. So your BEP break-even point is going to be, BEP is equal to your fixed cost, that is 30,000, Ctrl R, divide by, I'm going to put contribution margin over here, Ctrl R. So as you can see, now we are all ready to find the answer of company A and company B's break-even point. Let's do that. That gives us the answer 500 and 574. So okay, the variable cost should be 30 over here. It should be 30. So 500 and 833 is the break-even point in terms of units. Okay, this means that beyond 500 units, the company A, and beyond 833 units, company B would be able to make profit. Now let's swap the things up and change what is known and what is unknown. Let's take another where there is company A and company B, but with some difference, with some changes. Company A and company B, there is fixed cost which we don't know, so I'm keeping it blank. The price per unit is let's say 120 and 140. The variable cost per unit is going to be, let's say, 60 and 70. The BEP, we know it in advance, 500, let's say, and 600. So now in this example, the fixed cost is not known, but we have the information about the BEP. So using the formula, let's calculate the fixed cost now. So we'll say our answer over here, we have something that is called price per unit. So let's just code down in our answer price per unit. We have variable cost per unit. We'll get that detail. So what should be our contribution margin? Contribution margin should be available to us, which is, that was supposed to be 80 and 70. The contribution margin in the previous question and in this one. Okay, there was no detail as such given. So just quickly calculate as, we'll just keep it as 80 and 70 as the contribution margin. Okay, so the fixed cost would then be contribution margin, which is given to us as A. We have BEP as, this should be 60 actually. Let it be in this fashion, 120 minus 60 and control R. So our BEP is given 500, press control R, and then you have the fixed cost, which will be A into B. So this is your A, this is your B. So 500 into 60 will give us your fixed cost. Now let's make things a little bit trickier so that the concept gets clear and we can understand BEP analysis from all the angles. Now this is going to be your example number 3. In this case, we have again company A and B with some details. We have the total revenue in case as 50,000 and 60,000. We have in advance details of BEP in terms of units as 500 and 600. We have fixed cost or variable cost, okay, per unit as 3 is to 2, and for company B as 4 is to 3 as a ratio. Now fixed cost we don't know, the variable cost per unit we don't know, a contribution margin per unit we don't know. Okay, so all this is going to be, I mean, there will be no details in this particular thing. So let's get into this. Now we have the total revenue given. We now have much units we need to produce to be able to reach no profit and no loss zone, and where total cost equals to the total revenue. At the same time, we have a ratio given between the fixed cost and the variable cost, which will allow us to ascertain the fixed cost and the variable cost per unit. So first, let's start with the total revenue at the BEP. The total revenue equals the total cost. That means the amount of the total revenue equals to the total cost. So our total cost should be how much? Because I'm saying that cost and revenue are going to be the same. So if revenue is 50,000 and 60,000, then in that particular scenario the cost has to be 50,000 and 60,000. Okay, and we already have the total revenue and BEP units, so we can calculate the price per unit. Here the price per unit is going to be, we have BEP as 500 and 600 as we have been given the details. So the price per unit, we should get the answer. It shouldn't be much of a hit. So the price per unit is the revenue divided by the BEP, 100 and 100. So now let's find out the fixed cost and the variable cost. So the total cost is what? Fixed cost plus variable cost. So we have been given the information that the fixed cost and the variable cost of company A is 3 is to 2 and for company B is 4 is to 3. So let's calculate the fixed cost and variable cost per unit and the contribution margin per unit of company A. Fixed cost of a company, fixed cost and variable cost is 3 is to 2. So we can say, I'll just show you some calculation. As you can see the data, it's just a mathematics, and you put things in the way so that you get the fixed cost and the variable cost. Therefore, in this, after solving this, the variable cost for company A would be close to $20,000 and fixed cost would be $30,000. So our variable cost per unit of company A would be 20,000. That is the amount divided by the total BEP units. So let's write fixed cost as 20,000, 30,000, and 20,000 and 30,000 as variable cost. Okay, sorry, it's vice versa, variable cost and fixed cost. Therefore the contribution margin per unit of A would be how much? The price per unit, that is 100, that is available with us. And if you find the variable cost per unit, which is 20,000 divided by 500, which gives us 40, so 100 minus 40 gives us 60. Let's calculate the fixed cost and variable cost in the similar fashion for company B, and you get the final answer as 57.14. So in the last example we have calculated, in this particular example we have calculated the majority of the things. By all the missing items we have tried and covered up. Let's take one more example, example number 4, which has a couple of details. Again, company A and company B, we have fixed cost as 30,000 and 50,000, the price per unit as 190, and the variable cost, let's say, as 40 and 30. The desired profit that you need is going to be, let's say you want the desired profit of 10,000 and 15,000. So in this example, we will calculate the break-even point in units after considering the desired profit of the company that needs to be earned. So as the desired profit is fixed amount, to ascertain the number of units which will earn the desired profit for both the companies, we would consider the desired profit as an addition to fixed cost of this for the ease of calculation. And at the end, we would cross check to see whether the units have ascertained and are accurate or not. So now new fixed cost for both the companies is going to be what? New fixed cost of the company will be 40,000 and 65,000. So now let's calculate the number of the units which we will generate desired profit for both of the companies. As you can see, the price per unit is 190, variable cost 40 and 30. Contribution margin is going to be how much? Should be simple, 60 and 60. Don't need to calculate. I'm not going to calculate over here. So the total cost which is given to us is 40 and 65. The contribution we know 60 and 60. So BEP is going to be, so 40,000 divided by 60, which gives us 667, and 65,000, which was the fixed cost, divided by 60, which gives us 1083. So 666 units, company A would be able to make 10,000 profit, which it desired, and at 1083 units, company V would be able to make 15,000 profit as expected. So let's cross check the information to understand whether the calculation produced is accurate numbers of units for both these companies or not. So this is the calculation. The BEP is with us, price per unit. So sales is going to be BEP into price. Okay, variable cost per unit is available to us. So once you multiply the BEP units into D, you will get the variable cost. You have the fixed cost as 1350, so the desired profit gives us 10,000 and 15,000. So from the above calculation, it's clear that the BEP analysis produced the accurate number of the units to produce the desired profit for both this company. Let's see the Netflix break-even point for US customers. As you can see, the data net addition, the average monthly revenue, the marketing expense, the contribution margin thing is available. So Netflix added close enough to 4693 million in 2016, 5624 million in 2015, and 5694 million in 2014. Corresponding marketing expenditure was $382.8 million in 2016, 317 in 2015, 293 in 2014. The acquisition cost per unit of new user is 382.8 million divided by the 4.963 million, which gives us the 81.6 per subscriber. See the acquisition cost per new unit for 2015 and 2014. In the similar fashion, the data will be calculated. It is worth noting that Netflix is facing two major problems on domestic US front. Growth in subscriber is slowing down. Acquisition cost per subscriber has been increasing, and acquisition cost increased 50% in 2016 as compared to 2015. So let us now calculate the break-even point of Netflix to recap the acquisition cost per domestic subscriber. We'll calculate the break-even point in terms of months of subscriber added in 2016. Please note that I'm considering only two types of cost here. First is cost of revenues and marketing cost. There are other costs that flows from the income statement like general and admin costs, other expense, interest expense. In our calculation, we have excluded such expenses. The revenue per subscriber was 9.21, okay, and the contribution margin was 36%. So the contribution margin per subscriber is going to be 9.21 into 36%, as simple as that, which gives us $3.32. The total amount spent in acquiring the subscriber was $81.6. So the break-even point in terms of months is going to be 81.6 divided by 3.32, which implies that Netflix will take more than 2 years to break even on its domestic customer. You can see the data over here. Netflix added 14.341 million in 2016, 11.747 in 2015, 7.347 million in 2014. Corresponding market expenditure is also rightly available, and in the similar fashion you will calculate a couple of details. Let's see now limitation of the break-even point analysis. See, the BEP analysis is based on many assumptions, thus most of the companies don't rely much on BEP alone. They compute many of the ratios to make concrete decision. Here are few limitations of BEP analysis. There are many assumptions we make while computing break-even point. For example, we assume that the price of the product remains constantly all the time, but in reality the price changes at the different output level of the product. We also assume that the fixed cost remains same always, but even fixed costs change after a certain output. One of the chief assumption of BEP analysis to equate sales is output, but there may be differences between sales and output. Not all output is not meant to get sold, and there is a chance as well for normal or abnormal loss, where few outputs gets wasted. So most of the business have more than one product, thus it becomes tougher to calculate BEP. Variable cost per unit does not always remain constant. It changes when the production is being done in a large chunk, and thus the firm gets the input at much lower rate. So to make a final conclusion, VP analysis is useful for business which have one product and which are just starting out their journey. However, it becomes complicated in the case of the service industry or if the firm produces more than one product. Thank you everyone.